Why did nobody ever notice the quiet woman in the corner? That question would haunt every soldier at Forward Operating Base Echo long after the gunfire stopped echoing through the valley. That morning she'd been invisible, just another shape in the background of a war everyone was too busy surviving to truly see. Her name was Mary Collins. To most, she was the base's maintenance worker, the one who made coffee strong enough to wake the dead and fixed Humvee frames when engineers were late. 52 years old, quiet, ordinary, or so they believed. The day began like 1,000 others in the Hindu Kush Mountains, where thin air burned the lungs and silence was never trusted. At 400 hours, Mary was already awake, her routine clockwork. The hiss of the coffee maker was the heartbeat of the compound. Her hands, calloused, scarred, and steady despite the ache of arthritis, moved with slow precision. The dim light of the maintenance bay caught the silver strands in her hair, painting her in shades of steel and shadow. She didn't talk much, didn't joke the way soldiers did to keep the ghosts at bay. But she listened to the engines, to the whispers in the mess hall, to the tone of voices over the radio. To Mary, every sound had meaning, patterns, rhythms, clues. That morning, as she welded a stress fracture on a damaged Humvee frame, she glanced at the horizon and frowned. The wind was shifting earlier than usual. Strange. The kind of strange that meant something bad was on its way. The base began to stir. Footsteps echoed, laughter bounced off steel walls, and the hum of machinery signaled another day in a place where monotony was safety. Then they arrived, the SEALs of Team 7, 8 men wrapped in muscle and arrogance, the kind that came from surviving too much and believing they'd survive everything else too. Staff Sergeant Tommy Hawk Rodriguez led them, his voice loud enough to command attention from half the base. His team followed close behind, Mitchell with his ever-present phone, Santos with his sharp wit, Park who hid boredom behind sarcasm. They strutted into the maintenance bay like they owned it. Maybe they did. In their minds, they were the heroes, America's finest. Everyone else was just scenery. Rodriguez's boot deliberately caught the edge of Mary's workbench. A coffee mug tumbled, shattering on the concrete. The hot liquid splashed across her tools. "Oops," he said, smiling like it was a joke. "My bad, Grandma. Guess those old hands aren't as steady as they used to be." The others laughed, voices bouncing around the metal walls. Mitchell lifted his phone, filming. "Hey boys, base maintenance featuring the world's oldest coffee maker. Maybe she'll give us some tips on surviving the Civil War." Mary said nothing. She just reached for a rag and wiped the spill with slow, deliberate movements. Her face didn't flinch, didn't harden. It simply went still, too still. If anyone had really looked at her then, they might have seen it. That silence wasn't submission. It was calculation. Master Chief Patricia Wells stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. 28 years in the Navy had taught her to see beneath the surface. There was something about Mary Collins she couldn't place. Something she'd felt the first time she'd met her, a strange tension, like looking at a classified file with half the lines blacked out. "Rodriguez," she said sharply, her tone enough to slice through the laughter. "Briefing at 800, move." Rodriguez grinned, unaffected. "Just a little morning entertainment, Master Chief. Someone's got to remind the support staff about the pecking order." Wells didn't reply, she didn't have to. Her stare was enough to make the room quiet. But as the team left, their laughter fatting down the corridor, she looked at Mary again. The older woman was already back at work, welding torch in hand, the steady hum of flame filling the silence. By 800 hours, the mess hall buzzed with life. The air was thick with the smell of powdered eggs and overcooked toast. Soldiers joked, complained, checked phones, wrote letters they'd never send. Mary sat alone in the far corner, the same corner she always chose. She wasn't invisible, people saw her. They just didn't see her. Rodriguez's voice carried across the room, loud and confident. "You should have seen her face," he boasted between bites. "Like a lost puppy, probably doesn't even know what year it is." Laughter followed. Mitchell waved his phone. "Already got 200 likes on that video. Someone commented we should start a series, Granny Goes to War. The joke spread, as cruelty often does when it's easy. Other tables joined in. Only one man didn't laugh, Frank Williams, the cook. He'd noticed things others ignored. The way Mary calculated supply needs in her head faster than he could with a calculator. The way she seemed to know which engines would fail before the mechanics did. Captain Maria Torres entered, her presence enough to hush a few voices. Intelligence officer. Focused, sharp-eyed, never missing a detail. She scanned the room until she spotted Mary, sitting quietly, sipping her coffee. Torres crossed over. "Collins," she called softly, "you were checking the weather radar yesterday, right? Notice anything off?" Mary looked up, those green eyes, faded but not dull, meeting Torres with calm precision. "Low-pressure system moving from the north," she said. "Unusual for this time of year. Will create downdrafts in the valley by 1600 hours." Torres blinked. That was detailed, too detailed. "How do you know that?" Mary shrugged. "Been here 2 years, you learn patterns." Rodriguez overheard, smirking. "Great. Now she's a meteorologist too. What's next? Predicting earthquakes." Mary didn't reply, but something flickered behind her eyes. Not anger, not shame, something colder. Something she buried again just as quickly. Santos leaned back. $20 says she can't even hold a rifle without shaking. 50 says she cries at the sound of gunfire, Park added. Laughter again. Coins hit the table, betting on a woman who wouldn't defend herself. As Mary stood to clear her tray, her sleeve slipped back slightly. A scar caught the light, small, circular, unmistakable. The kind of wound only a bullet could leave. Wells saw it. So did Ahmed, the base interpreter. But by the time either processed what they'd seen, Mary was gone, disappearing into the hallway like a shadow fading at sunrise. At 1400 hours, the SEALs geared up for a routine patrol through Tangi Valley. Routine. That word always seemed cursed. Rodriguez checked his M4, Mitchell adjusted his helmet camera, Santos loaded fresh magazines. Mary stood near the motor pool, pretending to check oil levels. She looked at the clouds gathering above the ridge. Wrong shape, wrong direction, wrong time. "Storm's coming in wrong," she murmured. Rodriguez turned, annoyed. "What was that, Grandma?" "The storm. It'll interfere with your comms." He snorted. "Stick to coffee, ma'am. Leave the warfighting to professionals." Mary nodded slowly. "Of course." But her eyes followed them until the convoy disappeared into the dust. Minutes later, she was in the communications center. "Keep an auxiliary frequency open," she told the operator. 47.9 megahertz. "That's not protocol," the operator said, frowning. "Who authorized?" "Just please." There was something in Mary's voice, soft but heavy, the kind of tone that made obedience feel like instinct. The operator hesitated, then flipped the switch. Mary climbed the observation tower, each step a reminder of the arthritis grinding her bones. She pulled out a battered pair of binoculars and scanned the mountains. Her eyes followed the convoy, her mind tracing invisible lines across the terrain. Wind direction, elevation angles, blind spots. Patterns again. Patterns that whispered danger. In the command center below, Colonel Harrison watched the live drone feed. 4 Humvees crawling through a narrow valley like ants on glass. Everything looked quiet. Too quiet. And then the radio erupted. "Contact, contact." Rodriguez's voice strained, alive with panic. "We're taking heavy fire multiple directions." The drone operator zoomed in. The screen lit up with chaos. Dust clouds, muzzle flashes, 2 vehicles disabled, the others pinned, 40 hostiles closing in. "QRF status," Harrison barked. 15 minutes to spin up, 45 to target. "They don't have 45 minutes. Mary's binoculars caught the first explosion, a bloom of fire in the valley. Her heart clenched, not from fear, but from recognition. She'd seen this pattern before. Ambush from 3 sides, coordinated, professional. Someone had fed the enemy their route. someone inside the base. She descended the ladder faster than anyone thought a woman her age could move. The armory was chaos, soldiers shouting, grabbing rifles. Nobody noticed her slip inside. She moved past the modern weapons to the forgotten section. Old rifles, obsolete gear, memories. Her hand found what she was looking for, a Remington 700 worn smooth, black stock faded from years of use. She'd rebuilt it herself, piece by piece. Nobody knew, nobody asked. She picked up her maintenance backpack. Inside were 18 rounds hand-loaded to perfection, each one numbered, each one personal. As she stepped out, Captain Torres saw her. The rifle slung across her back, her eyes sharp as winter glass. "Collins, what are you doing?" Mary paused. "Check your records. November 9th, 2019, Operation Blackbird." Then she vanished into the storm. Torres froze, her mind racing. She knew the name. Everyone in Intel did. Operation Blackbird, the classified disaster nobody spoke of. She rushed to the terminal, typing furiously. Files opened, redacted pages blurred, but she saw just enough. One code name repeated again and again. Raven 9. Status: MIA, presumed KIA. Confirmed eliminations: 127. Outside, the wind howled. Mary climbed the ridge, 1,200 meters of jagged stone, every step agony. Her knees screamed, her lungs burned, but she didn't stop, couldn't. Every second meant another heartbeat lost in the valley below. Down in the command center, panic consumed the room. The drone feed showed 8 SEALs trapped, ammunition running out. The infrared camera revealed the impossible: enemy fire from 3 sides, perfect arcs, 0 gaps. Then suddenly one shooter fell. A second, a third, each kill precise, timed. Every 14 seconds another flash, another body dropped. The command center went silent. What the hell, who's shooting? No answer, just the rhythmic heartbeat of death through the comms. "Sir," the drone operator whispered. "Thermal shows one shooter on Ridge 447, just one." On the screen, a lone figure lay prone in the dirt, working a bolt-action rifle with mechanical precision. No spotter, no equipment, just skill, pure, deliberate skill. Rodriguez ducked behind a burning Humvee, breath ragged, ammo nearly gone. "Who the hell is that?" he shouted over the comms. Mitchell scanned with his scope. "Whoever it is, thank God they're on our side." Up on the ridge, Mary exhaled slowly. Range 1,218 meters, wind 15 knots northwest, air pressure 620. Her mind calculated automatically. Breathe in, hold, exhale. At the pause between heartbeats, squeeze. The rifle kicked. Another threat neutralized. 18 rounds, 18 lives. By the time the first Blackhawks roared overhead, the valley was silent. The ambush destroyed, the survivors alive. And on the ridge above them, a shadow stood, watching. The storm whipped her hair, tugged at her faded jacket. The raven emblem on her shoulder caught the light for a moment, sharp, black, unmistakable, before she turned and melted back into the mist. No one saw her return to base. No one noticed the coffee lady slip through the motor pool, hang up her jacket, clean her tools, and start repairing the same Humvee she'd left unfinished that morning. In exactly 18 minutes, a shadow on that hill had changed everything. Who was she? That was the question echoing through every corridor of Fob Echo when the Blackhawks touched down. Dust billowed across the landing pad, boots thundered on metal ramps, and medics rushed forward to pull the wounded from the helicopters. The SEALs were alive, bloodied, bruised, exhausted, but alive, and that alone felt like a miracle. Inside the command center, Colonel Harrison stared at the monitors as if they'd betrayed him. The ambush had been textbook, the kind of operation planned by someone who understood American tactics better than most Americans did. It should have ended with 8 flag-draped coffins. Yet now the only bodies were the enemy, 40 of them, all taken down in the space of minutes by one shooter. Lieutenant Jackson scrubbed through the drone footage again, his fingers trembling over the controls. "Sir, right there. Ridge 447. The camera zoomed in. The image blurred, refocused, sharpened. A single figure lay prone behind a rock outcrop, the rifle motionless except when it kicked. No spotter, no visible comms gear, no hesitation. Harrison leaned closer. One person did all that. Jackson swallowed. Yes, sir, one person, and they knew exactly what they were doing. Master Chief Wells said nothing. Her eyes narrowed, tracing the shooter's body language, the set of the shoulders, the disciplined movement, the rhythm between shots. Something about it struck her deep, a ghost of memory from a training film years ago. She felt her chest tighten. The door banged open. Captain Torres rushed in, tablet in hand, face pale. "Colonel, you need to see this." She tapped the screen. Redacted files scrolled past, names blacked out, locations erased, but 3 words remained clear. Operation Blackbird, Raven 9. Harrison frowned. "That's impossible. Raven 9 was declared KIA 3 years ago." Torres shook her head. "Presumed KIA, body never recovered. Look at this, confirmed eliminations, 127. Survived 43 days behind enemy lines. Voluntary discharge after everything." Wells looked up from the monitor. "That pattern, the 14-second delay between shots, it's the same one." "The same one as who?" Harrison asked. "Delta Force." Her voice was quiet, reverent. "Raven 9. Down on the tarmac, Rodriguez stepped out of the helicopter, eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting to see an angel step out of the mist. He knew what had saved them wasn't luck. It was precision, purpose. Someone had watched over them from the ridge, unseen and unflinching. He limped toward the medics, refusing treatment until his men were seen first. Mitchell was talking fast, adrenaline still burning through his veins. "Sir, I recorded part of it on my scope cam. You need to see this." Back inside the command center, the footage flickered onto the main screen. Grainy, wind-blurred. But there it was, the rhythmic pulse of a rifle working in perfect tempo. No wasted movement, no misses, every shot clean. Mitchell leaned forward. "That's not normal shooting, sir, that's art." Nobody laughed. Then Ahmed, the base interpreter, hesitated by the doorway. "Colonel, I think I saw who it was." Every head turned. "I was in the tower when the attack started. I saw someone leaving the base with a rifle, small figure moving fast. It was," he swallowed hard, "it was Mrs. Collins." Silence, disbelieving, heavy. Rodriguez barked a nervous laugh. "That's ridiculous. She can barely climb the stairs." But the truth had already started to settle like dust after a blast, slowly, inevitably. Wells pulled up the personnel database. Mary Collins, age 52, maintenance support, hired 2020 through the Civilian Reinstatement Program, no prior record of service, no fingerprints on file. Torres typed furiously, and Raven 9 disappeared from Walter Reed in December 2019. Collins appears at Fob Echo in January 2020. The room seemed to breathe as one. Realization dawning, impossible yet undeniable. Rodriguez didn't wait for orders. He turned and sprinted down the corridor, pain lancing his leg but ignored. He needed to see her face, needed to ask, needed to know. The others followed, Torres, Wells, Santos limping on a wounded shoulder. The maintenance bay glowed with the soft pulse of welding light. Sparks danced like fireflies against steel. Mary was there, exactly where she always was, mask down, steady hands repairing the same Humvee frame she'd worked on that morning. She didn't look up when they entered, not until the weld was perfect. Then she lifted the mask and regarded them with calm, green eyes. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice even, "can I help you with something?" Rodriguez stepped forward. His hands shook more than they ever had under fire. "Was it you?" he asked simply. Mary set the torch aside. removed her gloves and reached into her pocket. She placed a single brass casing on the workbench. .308 caliber, still warm to the touch. Nobody spoke. Colonel Harrison arrived moments later, his uniform still streaked with dust. "Raven 9, he said quietly. Mary's eyes met his. For a heartbeat the facade fell away. The air in the room shifted, heavy with things unsaid, regret, weariness, the ghosts of choices that never stopped following her. Then the mask slipped back into place. "I don't know what you're talking about, Colonel. I've been here all afternoon. Check the security cameras if you'd like." Tors already had her tablet out, pulling up footage. There it was, Mary welding at the exact time the sniper fired. Timestamp clear. "That's impossible," Tors whispered. Mary tilted her head. "Is it?" Wells leaned closer. The welding movements repeated too perfectly, each spark identical. A loop. "You edited the footage," Wells said softly. "You hacked our system." Mary smiled faintly. That would be quite advanced for a coffee lady, wouldn't it? The silence stretched. Nobody knew what to do. The evidence was both undeniable and unprovable, deliberately blurred. Wells broke it first. 18 brass casings. You collected them all except one. Why leave this one? Mary's gaze softened. Because sometimes people need proof that miracles happen. Then she lowered her mask and returned to work, as if nothing in the world had changed. Rodriguez stared at her, unable to move. His throat burned with words he didn't know how to form. "This morning," he began, his voice cracking, "I knocked over your coffee. We laughed at you, all of us." He swallowed hard. "And you saved our lives." Mary turned off the torch, lifted her mask once more. For the first time since anyone had known her, she smiled. A small, tired smile, but real. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," she said, formal and gentle all at once. "You and your team are America's finest. You risk your lives for people who will never know your names. Whatever happened today, you earned it through your service. Heroes saved heroes." Rodriguez dropped to one knee, not out of duty but gratitude. "Ma'am, thank you." One by one, the others followed, Mitchell Park Santos. It looked absurd. 4 elite warriors kneeling before a woman in grease-stained coveralls. But no one laughed. "Get up," Mary said quietly, but her voice carried weight. "SEALs don't kneel to anyone." They rose, and in that moment something fundamental shifted. Respect replaced arrogance. Curiosity replaced judgment. Harrison cleared his throat. Everyone out, except Collins and Rodriguez. The others filed out reluctantly, leaving the colonel alone with her. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a red folder. Classified markings screamed from every edge. "Before I open this," he said, "I need to know, are you Mary Collins or someone else?" Mary removed her gloves, placing them neatly beside the casing. "I've been Mary Collins for 3 years, Colonel. Before that was a different life." He opened the file. Inside was a photograph, 6 operators in full combat gear, faces shadowed by helmets. In the center stood a woman holding a Barrett M82, the same eyes, the same quiet focus. "Operation Blackbird," Harrison read aloud. 6 operators in, 1 out. You." Mary's hands trembled, the ghosts pressing closer. "It was a trap," she said softly. "They knew we were coming. We lasted 17 minutes. Then it was just me, 1,200 meters out, watching them die through a scope I couldn't put down." Her voice broke. "Titan was 23, had a daughter he never met." She opened a hidden panel in the tool cabinet and pulled out a battered notebook. Inside, dates, coordinates, 5 names written with care. 43 days, she continued. 89 kills during escape and evasion. By the time I made it back, I was 60 pounds lighter and something inside me was gone. Harrison closed the file gently. "They said you refused treatment. PTSD, survivor's guilt." Mary looked at him, eyes empty of apology. "What was there to treat? I did my job, my team didn't come home. No therapy could fix that." Rodriguez spoke quietly. So you became Mary Collins. You hid in plain sight. She nodded. I came here to fix things instead of breaking them, to make coffee instead of calculating trajectories, to be nobody. But Harrison wasn't done. This morning's ambush, someone leaked your patrol route, just like Blackbird. Mary's expression hardened. The pattern's been there for weeks. Check your logs. Frequency 47.9 megahertz. Every attack followed a burst transmission 15 minutes before contact. Rodriguez's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, face draining of color. Sir, someone just leaked the drone footage from today. It's already viral, 2 million views. On the tiny screen, grainy video showed her silhouette on the ridge, the rifle's rhythm unmistakable. The internet had already given her a name, the ghost of Tangi Valley. This is going to bring heat we can't afford, Harrison muttered. Mary wiped grease from her hands. With respect, Colonel, you have bigger problems. Whoever leaked that footage will try to clean their tracks. They'll come for me next. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the maintenance bay. Then glass shattered. Bullets tore through the window, sparks ricocheting off metal. Down, Mary hissed, yanking Rodriguez behind a workbench. Her hand found a Glock hidden beneath the tools, one of many secrets buried in plain sight. 3 shots, controlled, even. The firing outside stopped. Emergency lights flickered red. Harrison barked into his radio, calling for lockdown. Mary stood breath steady. 1 shooter inside perimeter. Minutes later, security confirmed it. Corporal Anderson from the motor pool, dead, weapon still warm, Taliban transmitter in his vest. By dawn, the investigation had spread like wildfire. Anderson wasn't alone. 3 more names surfaced: supply clerks, radio techs, even a lieutenant. A network feeding intelligence through encrypted crypto channels. And in the middle of it all stood Mary Collins, the woman no one had noticed until she saved them all. How do you rebuild trust in a place built on suspicion? That was the question that haunted Colonel Harrison as the sun rose over the Hindu Kush. The base was awake long before dawn, the air filled with radio chatter, bootsteps, and the metallic clatter of weapons being checked for the 3rd time. Soldiers moved differently now, less swagger, more awareness. The night's betrayal had shaken everyone. But in the middle of that chaos, Mary Collins sat alone in the motor pool, sleeves rolled up, tightening a bolt on a generator. Calm, steady, focused. The same woman who had taken down an entire ambush with 18 bullets now looked like someone's tired aunt fixing a lawnmower. Colonel Harrison watched her from a distance through the open bay doors. For a long moment, he didn't move. He'd seen men break under far less, soldiers half her age shatter from guilt or exhaustion. But she worked like she was keeping the world from falling apart, one wrench turn at a time. Captain Torres entered, holding a tablet. "We've confirmed 4 infiltrators," she said. "Anderson from the motor pool, 2 logistics clerks, 1 lieutenant, all funneling patrol data through encrypted bursts, exactly the frequency she mentioned." Harrison sighed. "Any higher connections?" Torres hesitated. "Still digging, but sir, she's been tracking this for weeks. Notes, coordinates, patterns, she had it all written down in that notebook." "Meaning she knew," Harrison said quietly, "and didn't tell anyone." Torres nodded. "She told me once that no one listens to the coffee lady." The colonel's gaze hardened. "Then they'll listen now." An hour later, the command center filled with senior officers and squad leaders. Maps lit the walls. Red markers dotted regions like open wounds. Mary stood at the front of the room, not in uniform, not holding rank, yet every eye was on her. "Morning," she said simply. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "The pattern started 6 months ago. Each attack followed the same cycle: intel leak, ambush, chaos, confusion. You blamed weather, terrain, bad luck. I blamed math." She pointed at the map, her finger tracing lines of connection no one had seen before. "These aren't random hits. They're probing actions. testing response times, measuring reinforcement routes. Someone was mapping your habits, your rhythm, your predictability. Her green eyes lifted, meeting theirs. Yesterday wasn't the end. It was the big show. A successful ambush on a SEAL team would have been worth millions in propaganda and recruitment. A murmur rippled through the room. The colonel raised a hand for silence. "Continue," he said. Mary nodded toward Tors. The leaks came from inside, not through the main network, too easy to trace. They used local frequencies, piggybacking on weather broadcasts. 47.9 megahertz. You missed it because it looked like static. Rodriguez, sitting in the back, stared at her as if seeing her for the first time all over again. "You've been doing this on your own?" Master Chief Wells asked, disbelief in her tone. Mary's face was unreadable. "Someone had to. Reporting it would have drawn attention. I needed proof before I spoke up. I've learned that truth doesn't mean much without evidence." There was silence. It wasn't accusation, it was awe. Captain Tors turned to Harrison. "Sir, we've verified her data. She's right. Without her intervention, yesterday's mission would have ended in a massacre." Harrison nodded slowly. "Then from now on, Collins operates under my authority. She gets full access." Mary exhaled softly, almost to herself. "I didn't want authority, Colonel, just prevention." "Sometimes they come together," he replied. Over the next 48 hours, Fob Echo transformed. The invisible lines between soldiers and civilians began to blur. Combat operators started showing up early to help maintenance crews. Mechanics joined tactical briefings. It wasn't protocol, it was respect. Mary never asked for it. She still woke at 400, still made coffee, still worked the welding torch with patient precision. But now people lingered when she passed. They asked questions, listened, learned. Rodriguez, once the loudest man in any room, became her shadow. He claimed he was helping with repairs. But everyone knew he was studying her, trying to understand how she thought, how she moved, how she saw the world in layers and patterns. "You're wasting your time," she told him one evening as they stood beside an open engine. "Maybe," he said, smiling faintly. "But I'd rather waste time learning from you than repeat mistakes that cost lives." Mary adjusted a bolt, her knuckles cracking softly. "Lesson 1, then, never trust the obvious." Rodriguez frowned, meaning. She met his eyes. The greatest threats rarely look dangerous. The enemy who smiles is more dangerous than the one who screams. He thought about that for a long moment. The next day, he stopped dismissing the quiet analysts and cooks who worked in the background. He started greeting them, asking about their work, seeing them, not as support, but as part of the same war. Even Mitchell, the team's social media addict, changed. The same man who'd mocked Mary online began using his platform differently. His next video wasn't about firefights or heroics. It was about the people behind the scenes. The medics who stayed awake for 72 hours. The mechanics who patched vehicles mid-mission. The woman who made coffee before dawn so others could make it through the day. The post went viral, but this time for the right reasons. Santos spent his recovery learning from Mary. Basic field medicine, survival improvisations, techniques she developed during those 43 days alone. "Why teach me this?" he'd asked once. "Because you'll need it when the manuals stop helping," she'd said. And Park, the team's communications specialist, tore apart the base's security protocols and rebuilt them from scratch, frequency hopping, encryption layers, redundancies. When he finished, he left a small note on Mary's workbench. "Thanks for showing me the blind spots." But perhaps the biggest change came in how the base felt. The arrogance that once filled its halls had softened into humility. The laughter that once mocked now carried warmth. People began to understand that strength wasn't about who fired the most bullets. It was about who kept the machine running, who kept others alive. Colonel Harrison saw it happening and said nothing. He knew better than to interfere with transformation. Some things needed to happen quietly, like the sunrise, inevitable, unstoppable, and deeply human. 3 weeks after the ambush, Harrison called Mary to his office. A classified envelope sat on his desk, marked with red stamps and an embossed seal. "The Pentagon wants you reinstated," he said. "Full rank restoration, back pay, your choice of assignment." Mary didn't even look at the folder. "No." Harrison frowned. "You don't even want to think about it." She shook her head. "Raven 9 died on that mountain in Coast Province. She doesn't belong in uniforms or committees. I'm just Mary Collins now." He leaned back, studying her. "You could train the next generation, share what you know." "I already am," she smiled faintly. "Every time Rodriguez picks up a wrench instead of a rifle, he's learning to think. When Santos watches me clean a weapon, he's learning patience. When people see me make coffee despite these hands hurting every morning, they're learning persistence. Isn't that training enough?" Harrison nodded slowly. He'd seen many forms of leadership, commanders, strategists, heroes, but none like this. "The offer stands," he said. Mary gave a soft nod and left. That night the mess hall filled with laughter again. Real laughter, not mockery. Word had spread that the Pentagon wanted to bring her back and she'd refused. Soldiers gathered, toasting her name. Frank the cook even managed to bake a cake from rations and powdered sugar. Written across the top in shaky frosting were the words, "Heroes come in all forms." Rodriguez stood, raising his mug. "To Mary Collins," he said, "the woman who taught us that courage isn't about fearlessness, it's about action despite fear. That strength isn't loud, it's steady. And that heroes don't always carry rifles." The room erupted in applause, but Mary wasn't there to hear it. They found her in the maintenance bay, working quietly under lamplight. The rhythmic sound of her wrench echoed through the metal walls. Rodriguez joined her, sitting beside her in silence. After a while, he spoke. "You know, everyone in there wanted to thank you." "They did," she said without looking up. "By learning, by changing." "Still," he said softly, "you could at least let them say it." She smiled. "Gratitude isn't words, Sergeant, it's conduct." They worked side by side for a long time, silence wrapping around them like an old blanket, the kind that said more than words ever could. After a while, Rodriguez broke it again. "That rhythm you shoot with, the 14 seconds, why that exact timing?" Mary's hands paused, her eyes softened. "Phoenix, my team leader in Blackbird, had a daughter. She was 14 months old when he died. He used to talk about her every day. Said she'd change the world someday. 14 seconds is my way of remembering her. Each shot is a prayer she gets that chance." Rodriguez swallowed hard. "That's beautiful." "No," she whispered, "it's atonement." Outside, the wind howled over the valley, carrying dust and whispers and the faintest echo of memory. Inside, the two of them kept working, soldier and ghost, both repairing what war had broken in different ways. No music played, no speeches followed. Just the quiet sound of bolts turning, engines being restored, and a woman's steady breathing as she continued doing what she'd always done. Fix what others forgot was broken. And as dawn painted the mountains gold once more, the base stirred awake to the smell of coffee already waiting for them, strong, steady, unshakable, like the woman who made it. Why did she still wake up before dawn when there were no more missions left to fight? That was the question Rodriguez often asked himself while watching Mary through the half-open bay door. It was always the same, her small silhouette moving between machines, steam rising from the coffee pot, the quiet hum of work beginning before the rest of the world opened its eyes. 3 months had passed since the Tangi Valley ambush. 3 months since the woman they'd once mocked had changed their understanding of everything they thought they knew about courage. The base had changed too. It felt less like a machine and more like a heartbeat. Every soldier, mechanic, and cook carried themselves differently, aware that the person next to them might be more than they appeared. Respect had become the unspoken language. Mary had returned to her rhythm, coffee, repairs, silence, but there was a subtle difference now. When she walked through the halls, soldiers nodded. When she spoke, people listened. The invisible wall between the fighters and the support staff had vanished. Still, even peace carries shadows. Rodriguez noticed it first, the tremor in her left hand. It had always been faint, a leftover from the old injury she'd joked about, but lately it had grown worse. Some days, when she lifted the coffee pot, it rattled slightly before she steadied it. Other times, he caught her pressing a hand to her back when she thought no one was looking. One evening, as they worked in the motor pool, he finally asked, "When was the last time you saw a doctor?" Mary didn't look up from the open engine block. "Doctors and I don't get along." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." Rodriguez exhaled, frustrated. "You're not invincible, you know." She smiled faintly. "No one is. Some of us just learn how to bend instead of break." It was her way of ending the subject. She returned to her work and he let her, though not easily. Later that night, when the base went quiet, she sat alone on the roof of the command center. The mountains glowed under a silver moon. She held a mug of coffee in her trembling hands and stared into the valley that had once echoed with gunfire. The ghosts were quieter now, but they never left. They never truly did. A voice broke her thoughts. "Can't sleep." It was Captain Torres, holding her own mug, steam rising into the cold air. "Old habits," Mary replied. "You." "Trying to figure out why someone like you chose to disappear." Mary didn't answer at first. "You ever lose people?" Torres nodded slowly. "Two, same day." "Then you know," Mary said softly. "Survival isn't always mercy. Sometimes it's punishment." The wind tugged at their jackets. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Torres said, "You saved 8 SEALs. You exposed a spy network. You've rebuilt this base from the inside out. That doesn't sound like punishment to me." Mary looked at her, eyes steady. Redemption and punishment aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same road. Torres didn't push further. Some answers weren't meant to be forced. She just nodded, set her mug down, and quietly left. Mary stayed until sunrise. The following week brought a rare quiet stretch. No attacks, no alerts, no late-night alarms. The calm almost felt wrong. Soldiers joked about it being the Collins effect, claiming that even the mountains respected her. She rolled her eyes at that, but deep down, part of her knew they weren't entirely wrong. She'd spent years studying patterns, enemy movement, weather shifts, communication frequencies. But lately, a new pattern had been forming, one she couldn't quite explain. Drones were picking up subtle changes in activity across the border, movements too coordinated to be random. Yet nothing official showed up in reports. She started keeping notes again, the same way she used to, scribbles in a small notebook that never left her pocket. The old instincts she tried to bury had begun to surface, whispering warnings she didn't want to hear. Then came the faint static. It happened one night as she monitored a generator repair near the comm center. The radio on the workbench crackled softly, an odd frequency, brief, almost like a whisper. 47.9 megahertz. The same channel she'd once used to save the SEALs. Her pulse slowed. She leaned closer, listening. The transmission was faint, distorted by interference, but the rhythm of it, the pulse pattern, was familiar. A code, one she hadn't heard in 3 years. Mary grabbed a pen, writing down the sequence. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 more bursts. Her stomach tightened. It wasn't random. It was a signal, one she'd used herself long ago under a different name. Raven 9. The realization hit her like a blade through ice. Someone out there was calling her by a name she no longer claimed. She waited until morning to tell Harrison. They stood in the command center, both staring at the waveform frozen on the screen. "You're sure it's not local interference?" he asked. Mary shook her head. "It's too structured. That's a call sign activation sequence." "For what?" Phoenix Protocol. Tors turned sharply. That's not possible. That protocol was sealed after Blackbird. Mary's expression didn't change. Then someone just unsealed it. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. A mission gone dark somewhere, something high enough to be off-book, desperate enough to reach out to a ghost. Harrison crossed his arms. If it's real, they're asking for you. I know. He studied her. You're not going. Mary looked at him calmly. I haven't said I was. Good, because you're not cleared, and you're not healthy enough for that kind of operation. Her smile was thin. You think they care about clearance when they're reaching out through encrypted dead channels. For the first time since Tangi Valley, the colonel didn't have an answer. That evening, the base buzzed with rumors. People noticed Mary moving with unusual focus, cleaning her rifle, not the old Remington, but a smaller M110, one she used for range calibration. They noticed Rodriguez following her with worry carved into his face. Tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing, he said as she packed a small bag of gear. I'm just checking on an old frequency, she replied. You can't even walk without a limp some days. I can still think, she countered. He grabbed her wrist gently. You told me once that disappearing wasn't the answer. And you told me once that soldiers act when others freeze, she said quietly. Which one of us is supposed to forget what we are? Rodriguez's jaw tightened. Then take me with you. No. Why not? Because someone has to stay behind and make sure what I built doesn't fall apart. Mary. She cut him off, placing a small leather-bound notebook in his hands. If I don't come back, everything you need is in here. Protocols, contingency plans, warning signs. Take care of them, Sergeant, all of them. He looked at the book as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. You're serious. Always. The next morning she was gone. Her quarters were neatly made, her tools perfectly aligned. On her desk sat a note written in precise handwriting. Coffee is ready for the next 3 days. After that, you're on your own. 2 scoops per pot. Never more, never less. No one saw her leave. No camera caught her. No sensor detected her movement. It was as if the mountain itself had opened a door for her and closed it again. For the next 72 hours, Harrison's team scoured the feeds. Nothing. No trace. Until a single message appeared on the secure network, a brief transmission marked with the signature R9. Phoenix Protocol confirmed. Extraction underway. Tors stared at it, her throat tightening. She's back out there. Harrison nodded grimly. Then God help whoever put her there. Back at the base, Rodriguez carried on her routines like ritual. He made the morning coffee too bitter at first, too strong the next, but he kept at it until it tasted right. Every cup was a small act of remembrance. He worked in the motor pool, training the younger soldiers the way she had trained him, not through orders but through patience. The first night she was gone, he sat in her workshop, staring at the empty chair. She said she came here to disappear, he murmured to himself. But maybe disappearing isn't hiding. Maybe it's how you keep others safe. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust across the compound. Somewhere beyond those ridges, a signal pulsed through the static. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts again. And in that rhythm, in that silence between heartbeats, the legend of the ghost of Tangi Valley began its second life. How far would you go to make peace with your ghosts? Mary Collins didn't ask herself that question anymore. She already knew the answer. Far enough that peace no longer mattered, only purpose. The night air over Kashmir was thin, brittle, and laced with frost. She moved through it like smoke, her body wrapped in shadow, her breath steady despite the altitude. The valley below glowed faintly from scattered fires, small villages tucked into the spine of the Himalayas, too quiet, too still. Her boots left no trace on the snow. The old instincts had returned as naturally as breathing, step, pause, scan. Every movement deliberate, every second accounted for. But this time there was no team to cover her flank, no command to report to, no backup waiting over the ridge. Raven 9 was back in the field, alone. Through her scope, the world narrowed into clarity. The flicker of a distant outpost, the pulse of heat signatures, the slow rotation of a sentry unaware he was being watched. She adjusted her sights, exhaled, then lowered the rifle. She wasn't here to kill, not yet. The signal had come from this sector, a distress pattern buried inside old encryption keys. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts. A call for help that only one person on Earth was supposed to recognize. But there had been no follow-up transmission, no coordinates, no voice. Just silence. Silence was dangerous. It meant someone wanted her to come. She found shelter in the ruins of an abandoned watchtower, its stone walls half swallowed by snow. Inside, she lit a single red lamp, barely enough light to see her hands. They trembled again, worse now. She flexed her fingers, wincing at the stiffness. The tremor had spread from her left hand to her shoulder. Nerve damage, maybe, or something deeper. It didn't matter. Pain was an old companion. She pulled a small photo from her jacket, 5 figures standing in the desert sun, laughing. Blackbird team before the trap, before the silence. Phoenix at the center, his grin wide, his arm around her shoulders. "One day, Raven," he'd told her, "we'll walk away from this and just live." She folded the photo back into her pocket and whispered, "You still owe me that walk." For the next 2 days she scouted. The pattern repeated. Strange radio bursts near civilian frequencies, faint but intentional. Someone was alive, or someone wanted her to think so. On the 3rd night she saw movement near the ridge, 4 figures in local garb, carrying military rifles, moving like trained operators. They weren't villagers. They were hunting. She stayed motionless, hidden behind the stone lip of the ridge. The group passed within 30 feet, speaking quietly in a dialect she half recognized. Then one of them stopped, looked around, and tapped his ear. They were tracking something. No, someone. Mary pulled her small comm scanner from her vest and flicked it on. The frequency jumped, 47.9 megahertz. Her pulse slowed. They were using her own signal. "Clever," she murmured, "but not enough." She waited until they disappeared into the trees before moving. By dawn, she trailed them to a remote compound built into the cliffs, crude but fortified. Through her scope, she counted at least 12 men, 2 vehicles, 1 satellite dish, and on the far end of the yard, a cage. Someone was inside. She adjusted focus. A man bound but alive, military cut, bruised, dehydrated. American, her heart skipped. The call had been real, someone from Blackbird. She didn't move for an hour, studying guard shifts, rotations, patterns. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. The cold was sinking deep, but the fire inside her was steady, the same cold precision that had saved the SEALs months ago. She didn't have the strength she once did, but she had patience. By the 2nd night she'd mapped their routes, marked weaknesses. She could have gone in then, a clean shot, one at a time. But she remembered something Rodriguez had said once: "You taught us strength isn't loud." So she waited again. Instead, she set up a diversion, not explosions, not gunfire, but sound. She rigged 2 speakers to loop faint whispers of movement along the far ridge. When the guards went to investigate, she moved in from the opposite side, her body a ghost against the snow. The lock on the cage was old. She cracked it with a knife, silent and sure. The man inside blinked up at her, confusion clouding his eyes. "Who?" She pressed a finger to her lips. "Quiet, can you walk?" He nodded weakly. She pulled him out, half dragging, half carrying him toward the tree line. Then the wind shifted. A light flared behind them. Voices shouted. The camp was awake. She turned, rifle in hand, breathing steady. The first 2 dropped before the others even spotted her. She didn't kill unless she had to, but she was out of choices. The 3rd tried to flank her. She let him. One more step, then silence. They made it to the ridge before she finally let herself breathe. The man stumbled beside her, collapsing against a rock. "Name?" she asked. "Captain David Hale," he gasped. "Recon element. My team went dark 3 weeks ago." Mary's blood ran cold. Hale. That name was in the Blackbird files, the replacement officer for Phoenix after he died. He looked at her, eyes wide with sudden realization. "You're her, you're Raven." She hesitated. "I was. They said you were dead." She smiled faintly. "They said that about a lot of things." Hale's comms were gone, so she used her emergency transmitter, burying the signal inside a civilian weather frequency. If the base still monitored her encryption patterns, they'd see it. Back at Fob Echo, Rodriguez was asleep when the alarm went off. "Sir, we just got a ghost ping on the 47.9 band, Torres said over the comm. "It's her. It's Raven 9. Rodriguez sat up instantly. "Coordinates." "Unclear. Transmission was brief, partial data." "Boost it, I don't care how, that's her." Mary didn't know if anyone would hear her. She only hoped they would. By the next morning, Hale was fatting. His injuries were worse than she'd realized. Internal bleeding, dehydration. She used her limited medkit, her hands trembling as she sutured wounds in the half-light. The tremor grew worse with every minute, forcing her to tie one hand to the other wrist just to keep steady. "Why'd you come back?" Hale whispered. "Because someone called." "Even after what they did to you?" Mary paused. "I don't work for them anymore. I work for what's left of them." He didn't understand, but he didn't need to. That night she carried him up the ridge as snow began to fall. Each step was agony. Her lungs burned, her body screamed, but she kept moving. Halfway up she stumbled. Hale caught her wrist. "You can't keep." "I can," she said. "I have to." The radio crackled. For a heartbeat she thought it was static. Then, "Raven 9, this is Echo Base. Signal acquired. Say again, location." Her breath caught. She pressed the transmitter. "Echo, this is Raven, 2 souls. Extraction priority 1, coordinates." The signal cut out. A flash tore across the valley, a missile strike, close enough to throw her to the ground. The world spun. She heard Hale shouting, but it was distant, muffled, like echoes underwater. She crawled toward the ridge, pulling him behind cover. Her vision blurred. Blood ran from her ear. The cold pressed in harder now, not from outside, but inside her chest, the old damage finally catching up. "Raven," Hale's voice cracked. "You can't." She looked at him, forcing a smile. "They found us, that's enough." Her hand went to her jacket. She pulled out the photo again, pressed it into his hand. "If you make it home, tell them I finished it." "Finished what?" "The promise." Another explosion shook the ground. The hillside gave way. Snow, rock, and silence swallowed everything. At Echo Base, the last ping disappeared from the screen. Torres stared at the monitor, her throat tight. Signal lost. Rodriguez slammed his fist on the table. "Get a team ready, now." "Sir, the area's hot." "I don't care if it's on fire. We're bringing her home." They never found her body. 3 weeks later, in a quiet hangar at Bagram, a single crate arrived, unmarked, sealed tight. Inside, one M110 rifle meticulously cleaned, a folded piece of cloth, a photo of the Blackbird team, and a small brass casing. There was also a note, written in her steady hand. "You can't save everyone, but you can make sure no one is forgotten. Don't let the noise of victory drown out the silence of sacrifice. Keep them human." Rodriguez read it once, then twice. He didn't cry. He just sat there, staring at the photo, until Torres quietly placed her hand on his shoulder. "She's gone, isn't she?" Torres whispered. Rodriguez shook his head slowly. "No, she just went back to where ghosts belong." From that day on, every SEAL deployment leaving Echo carried a new call sign, Raven Flight. Every mission briefing began the same way. Never underestimate the unseen. Never forget who watches the hill. And sometimes late at night, when the wind shifted through the mountains, they swore they could hear it, faint static, 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts. A reminder, a warning, a promise kept. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Who decides when a story ends? At Echo Base, no one really believed hers had. Months passed, yet her name stayed written on every chalkboard roster and every whiteboard note that said check with Mary before you go. The newer soldiers didn't know who she was, not really. They just heard the stories, the woman who'd saved a SEAL team alone, the mechanic who turned out to be a ghost from the old wars, the sniper who vanished into snow and silence. Rodriguez never corrected them. He just nodded and kept working. The motor pool still smelled like oil and metal and burnt coffee. Her tools were exactly where she'd left them, cleaned, organized, untouched. He couldn't bring himself to move a single wrench. Every morning before sunrise, he brewed 2 mugs of coffee out of habit, one for him, one for her. The steam rose between them like memory. Captain Torres sometimes joined him. She didn't speak much in those hours. Just watched the dawn filter through the bay doors, turning dust into gold. "Still no trace?" she asked. "None," he'd reply. "No remains, no rifle signature, no anything." Maybe she wanted it that way. He looked at the second mug. She always did. The official report called her missing, presumed KIA. Unofficially, she was something else. A signal, a whisper, a story soldiers told when fear set in. Ravens watching the ridgeline, ravens keeping count. But stories had power, and Echo Base changed again under their weight. The arrogance that once drove them faded into quiet competence. Operators double-checked each other's gear. Medics carried extra bandages without being told. Nobody left a coffee pot empty. And somewhere in that new discipline lived her echo. It started one cold night in November. The radio technician on duty, a 19-year-old named Keaton, swore later he hadn't been half asleep. The base network was silent when it happened. A soft crackle across the comms, then 3 short bursts, 2 pauses, 3 short bursts. 47.9 megahertz. The sound was unmistakable. Keaton froze, staring at the waveform pulsing on the screen. For a moment he thought it was feedback, a glitch, but then he saw the rhythm, intentional, steady, almost gentle. He hit record. Echo comms to command, "We've got an incoming pattern." Rodriguez arrived minutes later, still pulling on his jacket. He stared at the display like a man seeing a ghost. "It can't be," Torres murmured behind him. "Play it again," he said quietly. The room filled with the faint pulse of static, the sound that had once signaled salvation and farewell in the same breath. Keaton looked at them, confused. "Sir, what is that?" Rodriguez's throat tightened. "It's her." Torres frowned. "Could be interference." "Then why's it sending coordinates?" They all looked at the screen. A string of numbers scrolled slowly, looping 3 times before the signal faded. Latitude, longitude. Deep in the Wacken corridor, the same mountains where she'd vanished. Rodriguez stared for a long time. "Suit up a recon bird." "Sir, command will never authorize." "Then we won't ask." They flew under darkness, 2 Blackhawks and a medevac, hugging the valley floor. The coordinates led them to a plateau hidden between glaciers. No village, no tracks, just white silence under a sky full of stars. Rodriguez stepped out first, snow crunching beneath his boots. The air bit hard at his lungs. They searched for hours, sweeping with thermal drones, combing every crevice. Nothing. Then Torres spotted it, a trail marker carved into rock. Not recent, but deliberate. An arrow pointing east, then another, then 3 short scratches, 2 spaces, 3 short scratches. The same code. They followed it until the snow began to fall heavier. Finally, on a windswept ledge overlooking the valley, they found it, a small stone cairn, perfectly built. At its base lay a weather-worn notebook sealed in plastic. Rodriguez picked it up with shaking hands. The first page was blank except for one line written in her precise handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means the signal reached home." He turned the page. Inside were sketches, diagrams, notes, reconnaissance of movements along the border, arms convoys, training camps, satellite uplinks, dates all recent. "She was alive," Torres whispered, "all this time." Rodriguez kept reading. The last page held only a short paragraph. "They think ghosts can't act. They're wrong. Ghosts remember, and sometimes remembering is enough to keep watch." Below it a signature, R9. Back at Echo, the data from the notebook changed everything. The coordinates matched insurgent buildups no one had noticed yet. Within days, intelligence teams confirmed the threat, and an entire offensive was rerouted, saving dozens of lives. Command classified the information instantly. Rodriguez and Torres signed non-disclosure agreements thicker than a Bible. Officially, nothing happened. Unofficially, every operator on base knew. And so the legend grew. Soldiers began marking her initials, R9, on their helmets or dog tags. Not out of superstition, but as a quiet reminder that someone unseen might still be watching their flank. Rodriguez didn't encourage it. He didn't stop it either. He knew what belief could do, how it steadied hands and slowed panic. Sometimes at night, he'd climb to the roof where she used to sit. He'd watch the same valley, hear the same wind, and wonder if she was out there listening. One night as he sat there, a voice crackled over the comm headset he'd left open beside him. Soft, faint, female. "Coffee still terrible, Sergeant." He froze. The voice was gone as quickly as it came, just static now. But he felt it, the unmistakable mix of humor and calm she always carried. Torres found him the next morning still on the roof, headset in hand. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said. He smiled faintly. "Maybe I did." Weeks later, Echo Base prepared for another mission, a delicate extraction on the border. It was the kind of operation that would have once drawn cheers and bravado. Now it was quiet efficiency, the Raven way. Before liftoff, Rodriguez gathered the younger soldiers. "You all know the story," he said. "But remember this, she didn't save lives with bullets. She saved them with patience, awareness, and care. That's the real mission." Keaton raised his hand. "Sir, do you think she's still out there?" Rodriguez looked toward the mountains. The sunrise spilled gold over the peaks. "Maybe, or maybe she became part of them. Either way, she's watching." They took off just as the first light hit the valley. Above the roar of rotors, he thought he heard it, faint, rhythmic, carried on the wind. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts. The years rolled on. Some faces changed, some stayed. Echo Base expanded, then downsized, then changed names like all outposts do. But in every new mess hall, one thing remained constant, a small plaque above the coffee station. Mary Raven 9, Collins, the shadow on the hill. She watched so others could rest. Every year on the anniversary of the Tangi Valley ambush, Rodriguez brewed a pot of coffee before dawn and poured the first cup on the ground outside the bay. "For the ghosts," he'd say. Sometimes the radio would crackle right after, just static, just coincidence, but always the same pattern. And somewhere far beyond those peaks, a solitary figure might pause for a moment, listen and smile. Because maybe ghosts aren't lost. Maybe they just keep the world safe from the quiet. Sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do isn't to fight. It's to keep watch, unseen, unthanked, unremembered, and still choose to act. And when history asks where courage went when no one was looking, the wind over the ridge will answer softly. 3 bursts. 2 pauses. 3 bursts. A heartbeat. A promise. Raven 9. Years pass like wind across the Hindu Kush, sharp, invisible, unforgettable. The war had changed, the world had changed, and so had Echo Base. Its walls had been rebuilt twice, renamed once and stripped of everything but the sound of rotors and the smell of oil. Some of the old crew had gone home, some had gone quiet. Only one man stayed through it all. Rodriguez. He'd grown older, broader in the shoulders but slower on his feet. The streaks of gray in his beard matched the ash stains on the motor pool floor. He still wore his uniform like armor, though most of the younger soldiers called him Sir now instead of Sergeant. On the wall of his office hung a single frame, Mary's photo, taken from the crate that had returned without her. Below it, the brass casing she'd left behind, mounted in glass. Every morning he'd brew coffee before sunrise and pour a small cup on the ground, same as always. Tradition, memory, hope. But that winter morning, something changed. The radio in the corner crackled, faint, uncertain. Then it steadied into a pattern. 3 bursts. 2 pauses. 3 bursts. Rodriguez froze. He looked at the clock. 04:17 hours. The same time she used to begin her rounds. He pressed the transmit key with a hand that suddenly felt too heavy. "This is Echo 1, identify." Nothing, just static, then faintly. "Coffee still bitter, old man." The mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the concrete. For a second he couldn't breathe. He thought he was dreaming. "Mary." But the channel went dead. He stood there for a long time, staring at the silent radio, then turned toward the photo on the wall. The faintest smile tugged at his face. "You stubborn ghost," he whispered. Within the hour, he'd packed a field kit. If it was a hallucination, he'd settle it himself. The coordinates embedded in the signal led north, deep into the highlands near the Wacken corridor, an area listed as uninhabited on every official map. He flew there under the pretense of inspection, just him, a pilot and a supply bird. Snow swallowed the horizon. The peaks were knives against a steel-gray sky. When the helicopter touched down, he stepped out into silence that felt almost holy. Nothing but wind and white. Then at the edge of the ridge he saw it, a small cairn of stones, just like before. But this one was newer, the rocks clean, the edges sharp. On top sat a folded scrap of cloth, navy blue, embroidered with a single number, 9. He crouched beside it, heart pounding. Beneath the stones was a small metal canister, sealed tight. Inside, another notebook. The handwriting was hers. "If you're reading this, it means I failed to disappear again." He kept reading. The pages detailed surveillance notes on a new weapons route threading through the same mountains she'd once patrolled. Times, names, frequencies, all recent. At the bottom she'd written, "Old habits die slower than ghosts. Tell them to change the encryption. The enemy has learned the pattern." Then one more line, almost hidden beneath the fold of the page. "Keep the coffee warm. I'll stop by when the wind allows." Rodriguez exhaled, half laugh, half sob. "You never stop, do you?" He looked around, the ridge, the snow, the horizon. Nothing moved, and yet something in the air felt aware, watched. He pulled his radio. "Echo Base, this is Echo 1. You're not going to believe this." Static swallowed the rest. Back at Echo, he spread the notebook across the table. Torres, now a lieutenant colonel, stared at it with the same disbelief he'd once worn. "This handwriting." "It's hers," Rodriguez said. "And these coordinates, they match satellite images of a hidden encampment. She's been mapping them for months." Torres leaned back. "So what do we do?" He smiled faintly. "What we always do, listen." They followed her notes. The coordinates led to 3 small convoys that intelligence had missed completely. Each one stopped before crossing into civilian zones. Quiet prevention. No medals, no briefings, just results. Somewhere out there, she was still cleaning up the mess no one else saw. Weeks later, during a winter storm that grounded every flight, a package arrived at Echo Base. No markings, no return address, just a small wooden box sealed with wax. Inside were four things: a thumb drive, a folded map, a single bullet casing, and a note. For Rodriguez and Torres, don't look for me. Just look where the wind pauses before it turns east. Rodriguez inserted the drive into the secure terminal. The screen lit up with surveillance images, grainy drone captures of mountain routes, enemy stockpiles, new encampments, all dated within the last week. Holy hell, Torres whispered. She's feeding us intel in real time. He nodded slowly. She always said ghosts remember. Torres looked at him. You think she's alone? She doesn't need anyone. He paused, then added quietly, but she's not doing this for herself. She's keeping the promise. Which promise? He smiled. To keep watch. That spring, during a night exercise, Keaton, the young radio tech who'd first heard her signal years ago, picked up another faint broadcast. He ran straight to Rodriguez's office. Sir, she's back. Rodriguez hurried to the comms room. The pattern was the same: 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts, but there was something else this time, a faint overlay of sound, almost like wind through chimes. Then a voice, steady, calm. Raven 9 to Echo, you're never alone. The room went silent. Even the hum of the servers seemed to stop. Rodriguez closed his eyes, breathed once, then spoke softly into the mic. Copy that, Raven, we never are. The signal faded, leaving only static, but the air felt lighter, warmer somehow, like the moment after dawn when the dark finally gives up. Years later, when Rodriguez finally retired, the base commander called him back one last time for a ceremony. They built a memorial wall, names of those who'd served, vanished, or given everything. At the very top, under the section titled Unseen Guardians, one name was etched into bronze. Mary Raven 9 Collins. She never stopped watching. After the speeches and the photos, when the crowd drifted away, Rodriguez stayed behind. He poured a cup of coffee, placed it at the base of the plaque, and whispered, You win, Mary. You're everywhere now. Then, as he turned to leave, his radio, an old handheld he couldn't bring himself to retire, crackled once more. 3 bursts. 2 pauses. 3 bursts. And then, so soft it could have been the wind. Still bitter, Sergeant. He smiled through the tears, always. He looked out at the ridgeline, and for an instant, a flicker, a shimmer, a shift of light, he saw her there. Standing just beyond the snow, rifle slung across her back, hair caught by the wind. She didn't wave, she didn't need to. Then the clouds rolled in, and the figure was gone. But the signal stayed steady in his headset, looping every 14 seconds. 3 bursts. 2 pauses. 3 bursts. A promise still alive. Because some legends don't fade. They adapt. They listen. They endure. And somewhere, in the thin air where sound becomes silence, a woman named Mary Collins was still keeping watch. Not for glory, not for vengeance, but for the fragile, stubborn hope that someone, somewhere, would always be worth saving. Sometimes the most human thing a ghost can do is never stop caring. How do you measure the life of someone who never truly left? At Echo Base, the legend of Raven 9 had long since turned from rumor to ritual. Her story was told not in speeches, but in the way people worked, the quiet precision before a patrol, the steady calm under pressure, the simple act of checking the perimeter one more time, just in case. Years had melted into one another. Wars shifted, borders blurred, commanders came and went, yet her rhythm remained. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts, heard in radio checks, in coded signatures, even in the taps of a mechanic's wrench against steel. Rodriguez had aged with the base. The man who once chased shadows now walked with a slower step, cane in hand, the creases at his eyes deeper but softer. He still refused retirement, claiming, "Some ghosts deserve company." The younger soldiers called him Old Echo. To them, he was living history, the man who'd known her. Every few months, a new batch of recruits would corner him in the mess hall, asking the same question. Was she real? He'd always smile, sip his coffee, and say, "Real enough to change everything." And then he'd tell them the story, not with embellishment or grandeur, but with the weight of truth spoken by someone who'd lived it. He spoke of Tangi Valley, of betrayal, of a woman who fixed machines by day and saved lives by night, of the signal that meant hope, of how courage sometimes wore grease instead of metals. And when he finished, he'd add quietly, "If you ever hear that pattern, don't run from it. It means someone watching your six." The winter he turned 62 was harsh, the kind of cold that silenced everything but the wind. Most of the old outposts were automated now, run by drones and remote AI, but Echo still held a human crew. Tradition, they said. The human element mattered here. That December morning, the communications array lit up with static. Keaton, now the base's senior tech, was alone in the control room when it happened. At first he thought it was interference from the storm. But then the pattern came through, faint but exact. 3 bursts. 2 pauses. 3 bursts. He froze. No one had heard that frequency in years. He hit record and called Rodriguez over the PA. "Sir, you'd better see this." Minutes later, the old man shuffled in, wrapped in his heavy jacket. He looked at the monitor, saw the rhythm, and felt his chest tighten. After all this time. "It's her," Keaton said softly. Rodriguez didn't answer. He leaned closer to the speaker. Beneath the static, a faint voice murmured something, a whisper half lost to distance. "East Ridge not alone." Then silence. Keaton turned to him. "Sir, should we scramble a recon team?" Rodriguez shook his head. "Not yet. She never sends noise without reason." He spent the next hour decoding the faint variations in the signal timing. To everyone else it looked like random distortion. To him it was coordinates. The old code, still perfect. "Get me tours," he said, and a bird warmed up. The flight took them east, over frozen valleys where no one lived, over ridges that caught the morning light like glass. Rodriguez sat near the window, staring at the horizon, hand resting on the small wooden box he always carried, the one that held her bullet casing and the note that ended with "Keep the coffee warm." They landed on a barren plateau. No buildings, no heat signatures, just rock and silence. The younger soldiers began to doubt, shifting nervously, until one of them noticed a pattern in the snow, a faint outline of boot prints leading toward a cliff. At the edge stood a single antenna, half buried by frost, still blinking green. Rodriguez brushed snow from its base. A small plaque was bolted there, weathered but legible. "Echo Watcher Station 1, maintained by MC." Torres whispered, "She built this." Rodriguez opened the access panel. Inside, a still-functioning transmitter blinked, its battery nearly dead. He connected a headset and listened. Static, then a recording. "Echo Base," came her voice, older now, rasped by time but unmistakable. "If you found this, it means the pattern still matters. Good. That means you remembered." She paused as if smiling. "Don't look for me. Look forward. The world keeps breaking itself, but someone has to keep watch until it learns to stop. Maybe that's you now." Rodriguez closed his eyes. The headset trembled slightly in his hands. "Mary," he whispered, "you always did talk too much." The recording ended with the faint sound of wind and just barely audible another voice. Younger, female. "Copy that, Raven, perimeter secure." Torres caught it too. "She's not alone." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "No, she never was." They brought the transmitter back to base. Command classified it instantly, of course. "Unverified relic, likely automated beacon," the report read. But inside Echo, everyone knew better. The signal returned every few months now, faint, brief, always different coordinates, each pointing to some threat neutralized before it began. No explanations, just prevention. Rodriguez stayed on a few more years, training the new generation. He taught them patience, restraint, respect. He taught them to see the invisible work, the small acts that kept the bigger ones possible. Then one evening, as the sun bled over the mountains, he finally packed his things. On the hangar floor, surrounded by echoes of old laughter, he brewed one last pot of coffee. He poured 2 cups, one for him, one for the wind. "Guess it's your shift now, Mary," he murmured. As he turned to leave, the radio flickered. Not loud, not insistent, just there. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts. He smiled, left the second cup steaming beside the mic, and walked out into the fading light. Years later, long after Rodriguez was gone, an echo base had been turned into a research station. A young comms officer named Lena found an old handheld receiver while inventorying the storage bay. The label on its side read Echo, R9 Link. She powered it on, static filled the room. Then the pattern emerged. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts. She frowned, curious, and hit record. A voice came through, calm, steady, ageless. "Echo copy." Lena blinked. "This is Echo Research Station Kilo. Who is this?" A pause, then softly. "Doesn't matter, just keep watch." The line went dead. She tried tracing it. No source, no coordinates, nothing but silence and the hum of wind against the antenna. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing the rhythm in her head over and over. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts. It felt less like a signal and more like a heartbeat. The next morning, she began teaching her new techs a phrase she'd written on the whiteboard above the comm desk. Never underestimate the unseen. When they asked what it meant, she just smiled. It's an old tradition. And somewhere, high above the ridges where clouds drift like smoke, a lone figure sat beneath a weathered antenna. Her hair was silver now, her hands scarred, her rifle resting quietly beside her. She watched the valley below through binoculars, adjusting the focus until the research station came into view. A voice crackled softly through her headset. "All clear, ma'am." Mary Collins exhaled, the sound merging with the wind. "All clear, they're learning." The younger woman on the line laughed, still keeping count. "Always." She turned one last time toward the horizon where the sun rose slow and gold over the mountains. The signal light blinked beside her. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts, spreading across frequencies no one would ever trace. And as the morning wind carried the sound down into the valley, it merged with the rhythm of life below, coffee being poured, boots hitting earth, a soldier checking the horizon without knowing why. Because somewhere in the static, someone was still watching. Not for glory, not for medals, just for the promise. 3 bursts, 2 pauses, 3 bursts, a signal, a heartbeat, a legend that never died. Raven 9.